Following what has been a wild trade deadline, Brad Treliving has come out to the media and spoken out and revealed the truth behind his deadline today. And he revealed that the Leafs could have made a potentially much bigger trade than they ultimately made. So we'll break that down in this episode of Leafs Digest, as well as William Lagesson and Matthew Nyes. We have some updates on their front, so stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. We are on the road to 7,000. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, and thank you guys for your continued support. And Darius, let's get into it. It's been a pretty long day, and Treliving spoke out and revealed the truth on the trade deadline, and a lot of stuff kind of went on this press conference, and he said a lot of different things, and let's just get right into it. And there's a bunch of stuff, so let's start with this. They were asked about Brad Treliving not trading his first round pick. He said, "I just didn't feel it was something that made sense for us for the very short term, so it's good to have that asset here." I'm going to get your opinion on this before we get into one of the bigger things he had to say. You were kind of on the same side of the fence as he was about trading it. Very short term. There wasn't really many long-term options to trade that first-round pick for, and ultimately they stuck with keeping it in the 2024 trade deadline. What are your thoughts on this? And now that you had a few hours to resonate with how this deadline went.
Yeah, now that the dust has settled, because we get into it, right? And I really enjoyed like all the videos we made, and this might happen, that might happen, and everything was certainly still in play. But now that the dust has settled, I think the right play the whole time was to not trade the first round pick. I think you should use it. On a great young talent this spring. And I didn't see a fit for the Leafs to upgrade to use that pick. I just didn't see it, right? I didn't see it this year. And this year's trade deadline, I know there was a lot of moves and a lot of people were like, oh, the Leafs could have got that player for this and that. I'm just not sure it would have worked out for the Leafs. I don't know if a lot of those players were within their needs per se. And, trading the first round pick would be tough. I think you're going to get a really good player out of that. I mean, look at Easton Cowan. Everyone was slamming Dubas for trading Sandin for that first round pick last year. And then even with the first round pick selecting him, they were like, oh, this guy is like a second or third rounder. And now he's on a 30-game point streak in the OHL and on the second best team in the entire league. So not too bad at all. So I would have held on to it anyway. I think that was the right play.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. And ultimately, we kind of suspected they weren't going to trade it. And I mean, I was right, or you were right. We were both right. They didn't end up trading the pick there. Now let's get into what he had to say about. They asked him essentially about were other moves on the table, were bigger moves on the table. He said, "We tried to make some moves to address certain areas, but at the end of the day, a lot of the answers are going to come from guys that are in the room. That's the reality of the situation. We got a group that's driven. We got a group that's hungry." And he also basically went on to say that, they're going to need to improve internally. They wanted to say that, I don't know what the exact quote was, but essentially he was hinting that there were some bigger deals on the table, but none of them really were going to come to fruition, obviously without that first round pick. And he just didn't feel comfortable giving up that first round pick for the deadline, especially in a season where they need the guys internally to step up. He also spoke in the defense, which I just showed you guys a sneak peek of, which we'll get to in a minute. But Darius, this makes kind of all the sense in the world. We've been discussing it. If they want to win, they're going to have the guys like William Nylander, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews continue to play well and step up even more for them to have any chance of beating the Bruins or whoever they play in the playoffs in a couple months.
I think that's the thing about this season. It's always been the story that, the last couple playoff failures have been on the core. And even last year they won a round, but it was still the second round. The failure was on the core. They didn't come up big in big situations and big games, right? So I think it lies on them again. I think like Brad Treliving and Brendan Shanahan for that matter, because, he's the one really, approving everything or disapproving everything. It doesn't matter what Treliving brings to the table. It goes through Shanahan anyway, right? So I think they're staring them in the eyes, right in the face, and they're going, listen, people have been saying that you can't do it. You've shown that you can't do it the last couple of years. We're looking at you like, yes, we know you can do it. Can you do it? And that's what they're looking at right now. They don't want to go out and get any more big fish because they believe that the answer is in this room that they pay big money for, right? And it hasn't worked the last couple of years, right? It hasn't worked since the Matthews and Marner and Nylander era started. But they're looking at them right in the face this year and saying, listen, we got you help around you, like before the season started, who should, turn it on in the playoffs. And they're looking at them right in the eyes and going, you have to get this done. All this money is behind you. We've committed to you long term. This is it. You have to do it. And you have the skill to do it. And we believe in you. So I think that's very interesting going forward because it's the same story. They have to get it done. But one thing I would like to mention too is if you watch the game against the Bruins the other night, or I guess last night at the time we're recording this, yes, they lost 4-1. Yes, they looked not great at times, even though they dictated play at other times. But the one thing that stood out to me is, yes, it wasn't the top guys like Matthews and Marner fighting, but you had like Bertuzzi fighting. Like they weren't getting pushed around like they normally do. Normally they play the Bruins or these top teams like Florida. They get pushed around and they lose. They get absolutely slaughtered. They just didn't get pushed around. Now you can use the excuse they had the flu and that's why they lost, all that stuff. But they didn't get pushed around. And I think in a playoff series with the Bruins this year, say what you want about it, there might be some more pushback. And I think guys like Bertuzzi and Domi get better in the playoffs, and we saw it last year too. So it's going to be very interesting to look out for, because the deadline, the way I look at it, I don't know if they were really ever going to go after a big fish. The answer is in the room. Treliving's right.
Yeah, at least they weren't going to go after one after the moves that they made yesterday with Lyubushkin and Joel Edmondson. Very interesting. It is also interesting to put kind of the what if on the table to see what if. I wish you would have told us, they never do and they never will, what kind of players they were really going after, and seeing what first round pick, because I'm sure there was offers and both ways where maybe the first round pick was dangled and ultimately they decided against it. And again, this is what someone on TSN on the Overdrive 1050 had to say about it. This is Treliving and Shanahan saying, we've done the heavy lifting, we've invested in these guys, you're going to have to do it on your own here. And I mean, that makes some sense for sure. I guess some more heavy lifting would have been going out and getting a guy like Andrew Peeke or someone like that, but they got a couple of big bodies, and hopefully that'll pay dividends going forward. And he also spoke in the defense, saying it's going to continue to be a work in progress. Excited to get Joel Edmondson. He's big, rangy D-man. He adds length, physicality, size, experience. Him and Lyubushkin, we've added some size, bite, and now we got to go by committee and get it done. I tend to agree on that. Now, Darius, let's discuss a couple things. We're going to have our own video about this, but we kind of decided to combine it. It's been too much today to even discuss, but Lagesson was claimed by the a lot of different, I don't know what's the actual team he was claimed by. We'll figure it out in 2 seconds here. It's Anaheim. There we go. It's on the line for a second. William Lagesson was claimed by Anaheim, which is interesting. A bit unfortunate, actually. A lot of Leafs fans are upset about this. It's kind of just the price and the cost of doing business when you have to make moves in anticipation for other moves with Edmondson, with all these guys that we ended up with. Lyubushkin. Matthew Nyes, another thing here, he got sent down to the AHL, making him eligible to play for the Calder Cup with the Marlies. So the team is looking a bit different. No more Lagesson, no more Matthew Nyes, and even just a week ago or throughout the whole season, Lagesson's a decent player. I could see him making an impact for Anaheim going forward, and who knows beyond this year, but unfortunately, he got claimed and he won't be able to stick with the Maple Leafs organization.
Well, for Lagesson as a player, good for him, because he might end up on like their top 4 pairing there in Anaheim, and he might get some playing time. For the Leafs, you lose a good depth guy. I thought he was able to, come in when there was injuries or whatever, the flu bug, all that stuff, and he played pretty good minutes. I think recently he kind of looked a step behind, but he hadn't played in a long time, right? So I thought he came in and did his job. Losing him for the Leafs, I don't think that's in the big picture this year anyway. Like, they just acquired Edmondson, and they have guys they can call up. They have enough left shot defensemen. They're all right. So that, it sucks to lose that player. I thought he was pretty good, but he can always come back next year and figure it out like that, right? So that's all good. Matthew Nyes, I think, is a strictly paper transaction. He'll probably play tomorrow night against Montreal Canadiens because he's on an ELC. They can send him back and forth. And like you mentioned, he's eligible for the Calder Cup playoffs, although that's pretty interesting because the Marlies are on the outside of the playoffs looking in right now. They could still make it, but they're on the outside in that 9th spot. So that'll be interesting to look at too, because if the Leafs do get eliminated at some point, the Marlies are still in the playoffs. He can at least go down, get that experience in the playoffs with the Marlies. So that's good. That's a good thing. I didn't even think of that they sent him down. Now he's eligible for the playoffs. So that could work out well. But yeah, I expect him to play tomorrow night. So just a couple of paper transactions.
Yeah, and Lagesson, good player for us. We'll see what happens going forward. And ultimately, the Leafs didn't make a huge move on today's deadline, but they did at least add a couple of blue liners, which we've been clamoring for all offseason and now, all offseason and even now, all so far throughout the regular season. And now it's up to them. It's up to them to actually play well. The goaltending's been a bit shaky recently. Joseph Wall hasn't looked great necessarily, albeit it's been against the Bruins, but it's going to be up to them to figure it out. But that'll wrap it up. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the trade deadline coverage here. We'll be still uploading every day, so make sure to tune in for that. And thank you guys for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll see you soon.